And someone was talking about the fact that we have to include the diaspora, the Africans inside in the continent and beyond in the conversation. And I hosted the second activation of this ritual in Ghana as part of the year return. And so everybody here, so the year return was a commemoration organized between the US and Ghana to mark 400 years of the deportation of the first enslaved Africans from the coast of Ghana to Jamestown in Virginia in the US. And there was a series of events organized throughout the year. And so I decided to organize a banquet. I call it the Chop Bar, the Love Feast. The first one I would say is the secret to reality is that everything is just a dream, and it is only when dreams are seeded onto the infinite soil of our imagination that it can manifest into our world. And the second is reality is a moving sea whose waves follow the contour of our imagination. Next page. Next page. Okay, you guys cannot see it. I invite all of you to go on the website. It's actually very beautiful, unfortunately. Okay. Do you guys manage or should I just continue? This is what I'm looking at on my screen. Maybe I'll just share my laptop a little bit. So essentially, what I've designed now, it's so tugunaworld.com is an ever. So this is not happening. Okay. So tugunaworld.com is an ever expanding laboratory of dreams that serves as a forum for cross-cultural conversation on desirable. No, because I need to read. I'll just move short. Ever expanding laboratory of dreams that serve as a forum for cross-cultural conversations on desirable future, converging ideas and cultures from across the world to imagine and shape the possibilities of tomorrow. So essentially, what I've designed, it's a lab. So it's a research lab that is based online on the website. And it's very much a project that means art, design, and foresight. So foresight is the study of the future. Experience combines art, technology, and spirituality to provide a mindfulness experience using which participants can envision desirable future scenario guided by the innermost desires. The lab blends a mixed media art installation, a metaverse dream world, a digital divination portal, and a multimedia platform dedicated to the investigation of the future. Next one. Yeah. So this is what the platform looks like online, and it's on tugunaworld.com. It's free and it's open. I'll give you some context about how the space was designed. So we can move to the next image. So informed by Ifa, an ancient divination system from West Africa, of dreams takes the form of a digital temple composed of 5 buildings built around an open courtyard and nested within a lush primordial garden. According to Ifa, everything that exists in our world stems from an original primordial energy, and the path to true satisfaction and full life lies in recognizing 5 essential pillars: Semeji, which refers to the body, Kalbe the mind, Bemeji the spirit, Sameji the heart, and Nukumeji the soul. So to give you some context, so essentially what I've designed is a workshop. I call it the Future Dreaming Ritual. And the workshop takes place either within physical immersive installation or within a virtual environment. That virtual environment you can access if you are with a VR headset or even with just directly using your browser. And that space is designed like a temple. And the temple is to explain how energy moves into matter. So basically how things are created into the world. And so in the context of IFA, there's this idea that for humans, when we consider the fact that humans manifest and create as well, we have to consider 5 pillars, which is the body, the spirit, the mind, the heart, and the soul. And this is the question that we investigate workshop. So tomorrow I'll be hosting the workshop. So you are invited to come and participate. So we look at how will we eat, how will we dream, how will we play, how will we love, and how will we pray in the context of an ideal future. So for each of them, we look at fundamental questions, because if you just ask anybody, if you could design your ideal future, what would you like? Most people will tell you, I want a big house. I want a big. Think about it because they start from a place of scarcity. So they start from a place of a world that has limitation. And so therefore they're thinking about danger, amass wealth, and, push danger as far as way possible from me. But if you consider that everything that exists in the world, and this is not just an idea, it's a fact, everything that exists in our world, the good and the bad, is informed by human imagination. So what it means is that the only limit to this Africa that we're dreaming of are the limit of our imagination. So if there's something that we need to change to be able to get to that vision, it's our ability to imagine. And you have often people that tell you, yeah, but this is naive, this is not possible, I'm a realist, I'm this. If you look at some of the technology that we're using today, when you look at smartphone, 200 years ago, someone would have come and put a smartphone on the table, and maybe people in his village would have killed him, thinking that this is witchcraft. And now you the biggest challenge that we had is not a question that we don't have wealth, we don't have power, we don't have intellect, anything. It's a question that we stopped dreaming because we started believing that reality was something that existed outside of us, that we were not co-creator of our reality, and that the best thing we could do is just find accommodation and adjustment. And what we failed to understand is that any system, no matter how oppressive they are, in order for them to sustain themselves, you need collaboration. And that collaboration happens whether you are conscious of it or not, right? So all forms of oppression that you have, they cannot just happen to you like that. No, there's a moment where you make decisions within yourself, whether conscious of it or not, whether you think that it's by duress or not, that compromise you, and that actually, somehow you end up believing that that project is stronger than the dream you have within yourself. But if you want to create something better, we need to have space and forum where we don't just speak about what doesn't work. When we start speaking about what we want, and we start speaking about the kind of future we want to design for ourselves and our children. Next image. Actually, go back. Go back. No. Return. Again. So this is a visual from the space. So this is a strange project. It's very much like a research project. Disclosure, I'm at MIT at the moment. I'm a fellow. Same time, we need to have scenarios that are informed by our fundamental desires. And yeah, you can go to next. So this is more visual of the space, the virtual space. And you can just go down, I'll just explain. So I invite you to go on the website to experience it. There's videos, all of this is with videos, etc. And yeah, so I think in Yep, you just see visuals, visuals. Yeah, continue. Go back. Yeah. Next. No, no. Move forward. Yes. More visuals. It's a beautiful environment, so you'll see a lot of beautiful images on it. And this is afterwards what you were seeing now. It's a representation of an installation, a presentation that I'm going to have. I'm having a series of exhibition on the work, but I'm very much seeing it as two parts. There's a part of it that is artistic, but there's very much a part of it that is understood as advocacy, foresight thinking, and campaign for us to really have this type of conversation. Because I think that as we're projecting ourselves in the future, we have to have other type of scenarios. So that when you leave gathering like this one, you are empowered within your agency because every and one thing I think I would say actually, and I think that's maybe a good point, is that the thing that really lends middle class family, it doesn't come from wealth, it doesn't come from any kind of influence. The way that we understand how an influence, this is not at all his background. The only thing that they had was a belief and the ability for change and the belief that change will happen if you're ready to work for it. That was it. When you had many people around you that maybe more power, they will understand more power, etc. And that will say, this guy is naive. Whatever this guy is trying to do is just wasting his time. There's nothing for us to do that. But anything that we look in our life today that we see value, this thing came on the back of people that were able to dream. And these people were able to dream so strongly that they were able to inspire people around them, start believing in that thing they were hearing within themselves, but they were second guessing themselves. They were conditioned to second guess. And so we all need to become again radical dreamers if we hope to manifest the Africa we deserve. Thank you very much. I'm coming back to speak in 10 minutes.
I am absolutely stunned and fascinated. I think we've just listened from a genius. If you've never met a genius in your life, this is one. Please clap for him. I mean everything I have said, because rarely do we see an intersection between technology, digital technology at that, and spirituality. And there are certain sentences that struck me, like the digital temple, and where one said, everything that exists in our world stems from a primordial field. We're requesting the IT team to help us put the domain, is that what you call it in IT? The website on, to write the website here so that we can log in maybe here or later on in the day on the WhatsApp group. Yeah, he's posting it in the WhatsApp group so we can visit and have a look at that. Absolutely fantastic. Let's appreciate him one more time. Yeah. Okay, the room is now full. Ania said, I have a lost key here. I do not want to read the number because you might get unwanted guests. But the first three numbers are 1 and 3. So if you've lost your key, okay. You know the owner of the key. Okay, this could go down a slippery slope. She knows the owner. Okay, apparently the owner is from Angola. There's two owners, one from Angola, another from Nigeria. Such amazing detail. Thank you. Okay. We're going to hear from the audition quickly. We've allocated 30 minutes to that exercise. So please come take seats up here. If you know you are presenting for your breakout session and you have 5 minutes. Okay, in the order of appearance on the program, ethical governance in a united Africa. Who's presenting for that group? Please come. Sorry, you won't get a chance to see. But there are ballots.
I think
Some groups have more than one. Okay, fine. There's a case of vote rigging here. Please come, you're welcome. Five minutes. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. My name is to discuss Africa, discuss the issue of culture, politics, contemporary issues, especially, and the challenges and what to be done. One of the first things that was discussed is the issue of elections, which was also linked to the current situations in Kenya, Nigeria, and other African countries that are experiencing what we are experiencing. The group also explained, because we don't want to bore ourselves with colonialism, what has happened in the past, even though we recognize that itself, that African liberation or African situation from colonialism to this era, we have the challenges. But in the group, we felt that the situation have changed, the narrative have shifted, and we're in the era of neo-colonialism, we're in the era of neoliberalism, and how we're going to position Africa to achieve its ultimate task. The question now arises in the group, in our conversation, that what will now be the philosophical program that can change and can advance Africa itself moving forward, away from the quagmire that we have. Even though our great founders, Nkrumah, Amicaba, and the rest of them projected and come out with a there was a common consensus, and that consensus is that we need to come together. We need to begin to think
how we are going to liberate Africa from the overhaul, and how we are going to empower the people. Because we understand our group, and we also think that we have a very ethical governance. We need to ensure that the oppressed people, we emphasize that the oppressed people needs to be empowered. Even also, the women liberation movement and the rest of it is a factor in our group also, that people need to be empowered. People need to know that government is something that they should be participatory. They should ensure that they were able to have the right ideas. So we're able to look at all these issues. And we said that in practice, politics is inevitable. We are firmly recognize it, and we are very strong with that statement that politics is inevitable, that we need to be involved in politics. We need to be involved in elections, be involved in educating the people. We need to be involved in sensitizing them for them to know their democratic rights, for them to be involved in everything that has to do with changing the narrative of Africa. It might not be now, but it's something that we believe that we can work towards for now and for a better of Africa in generations to come. Thank you.
Trends in different countries in Africa, what's happening. And we basically looked at the challenges to the freedom of assembly. We talked about the challenges on the right to protest, on the attack to individuals, to different organizations. We looked at repressive laws being approved every single day and making civil society overwhelmed. And also we looked at how sometimes it's very difficult to react and respond to everything. We also looked at people who on the front line feeling isolated while they are doing their work, and also the total lack of trust in the justice system. We also talked about fake news, AI, and so many other aspects, including some key moments where we see that the attacks on civic space is even more like visible. We looked at the elections period that normally will be stressful before, during, and even after. And we looked at different examples of how, for example, the use of social media in some countries have been criminalized, that today criticizing the president, for example, it's a crime. And we looked at the examples of Angola, where right now there are 5 people who are in jails because they protested. We looked at these bills even reach the parliament if we are able to stop them, because the process becomes even harder when the bills are there. We looked at the necessity of a rapid response, well structured, so that people can get easily support, because one of the biggest challenges that we see is that people don't have a system of support, and that makes the struggle even more difficult. We want people to continue feeling the courage to go out, to protest, to do whatever they want to do, but knowing that others will be able to support. We also talked about the traditional media and the role that it can play. because we were looking at internet shutdowns, and there were examples of using radio, for example, that would enable people to organize in different ways. We looked also to supporting systems. There were ideas, since dreaming doesn't cost anything. There were examples that probably, just like other classes, like journalists, like Doctors Without Borders, would be a time for us to think also something related to activists as well. We talked about fake news, and we thought that probably we should think of units or networks to do fact checks, specifically during elections period, which is one of the moments where fake news are like massive. We also talked about extremism, and also talking about how people have to know their rights. And one of the aspects okay. We also talked about alternative ways of continuing conversations, and one of the issues that we thought is that we always resort in the same social media platforms, and perhaps would be a time for us to think about our own ways of communicating with each other. We also thought that today we do have access to information from all the levels, but for some reason, we're still not able as Africans to give response and solidarity to other countries. And it's a time for us to be able to use the structures that we have to be able to give better reply. We also thought that in context, when we were having our discussions, we basically divided the countries under military regimes and civil governments, and we thought that the context is different. And some of the ideas were that in the countries where we know that people cannot talk because civic space is completely gone, then probably other countries should be able to talk on behalf of others. So that was one of the things that came up in the discussion. Okay, time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from the group that discussed advancing gender justice and feminism in the African context.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So we are given 5 minutes. I think we have 2.58. So we try to understand how exclusive gender is. Walking into this place, I've had like 3, 4, 5 people ask me, are you a he or a she? I find that embarrassing because I am human. Before anything, you think I am. So I do not need to be a he or a she to be in spaces of every one of us like this. So when we are talking about gender, we should understand that an injustice to one is an injustice to everyone. We can't be talking about moving on with gender and everything, and we are still excluding other people in our movement. We have the intersex community, we have the LGBTIQ community, we have the sex workers, we have other people. We need to make that word, gender, very inclusive for every one of us. Thank you.
So my name is Rachel. I'm going to be a bit not scandalous, but from a gender justice perspective, all of us exist from our own Pan-African way. We come from complicated families. So what means family to you might not mean family to me. We come from polygamous, monogamous. Our friends are also our family. Our comrades are also our chosen family. So family is not just a family. So some of the things that we had to say from our own perspective and gender and feminism perspective is that despite the social norms that exist in the movement and outside from our own public space, is that we can't hide that we can come and dream radical and assert the fact that first, also women are not homogeneous and that we exist in our own diversity, including what my colleague had just said, also having a LGBTQ family. So for us to move on, you're a young mother, a young woman, a teenage girl, we have to exist in this space of Africa moving forward. And then the other point that we had is that also system within the movement, as much as we are calling patriarchy outside, there is patriarchy within our movements. And that's the reality. And for us to be able to move forward, many people are talking about putting in feministic processes in movement and organization, but how the reality looks like beyond tokenism. What does reality looks like in terms of practice in the movement? It means 50% of this continent are women in our diversity and gender conforming people. So it means Africa cannot rise if you're not included. For Africa to rise, we must be included. The other part that we have to look is whatever the wars are going through and forced disappearance and women, young women taking lead in different movements in the world, we can't visibilize the role young women are playing and women in this space. So it means that the reality is that we need from our own thematic area, feminist delegation, solidarity, standing in solidarity with the Sudan team, what you've been seeing in Kenya going on in terms of unforced disappearance in whichever countries we come from or provinces. We have seen cases of femicide targeting a lot of women across the continent, criminalizing of female bodies across the continent. What it means for us, it means that we need to stand for each other and stand in solidarity with women. The other point that we looked is in terms of funders. We had also recommendation for funders. And what Africa Rising can be able to do is that there's a lot of research. There's a lot of also work being done by Black Feminist Fund, AWID, and other movements. Is that protection of everybody in the continent. The other point that we had to look on was around even movement space knowledge. There's so much we have seen around the knowledge in the movement, and when you talk about training, we understand a lot of members who are really saying from also Africa Rising perspective, but we have realized there's need for value clarification again in terms of understanding what is feminism and what is gender justice, but is not left the burden to women in the movement. That's not the burden of women in the movement. The collective work that we have to do, all of us, understand what it means showing up for, being there for each other
afin de
in order for
comprendre
us to move forward.
de nous entraider. Je ne sais pas si mon temps est écoulé. On me dit qu'il me reste 6
We
secondes.
have to talk to from an Africa Rising perspective. The document and the manifesto has to reflect what we are saying from the group. We don't take our case to court. Thank you.
Thank you. Used all your time. Next, climate and ecological justice.
Thank you. I see people cheering. I hope I'm wearing on top. I'll tell you that's the main reason why I was given this job to present how I'm dressed, yeah, not necessarily about how smart I am. So for the first 10 seconds, I want to spend them by first saying hi to my people from home. You know, I've wondered when I'm going to get here. See, this is the proof that I'm in Ghana, I'm in Accra. And for the next 5 minutes, these 300 people, it's in my power to
you to what follows after an appetizer. Is it a main course or a second appetizer, if you like, and then a main course and then a dessert, right? So the conversation, what I'm supposed to talk about is context on climate and ecology within the Africa setup. Now, the appetizer here is just the context of what this is all about. And we spent some time, after discussing, we were very involving, trying to get everyone to be involved, the discussions, the translation and all that. But we agreed that the biggest problem that we're seeing within the climate and ecology work that we're doing within the continent, and it's true for all the other works that we're doing as African Rising or ourselves from other movements, it's the fact that we have allowed for the narratives that we're using to be mostly guided from what we're hearing from the global north. So if you talk about climate, most of us, the definition of climate that you use is what you've heard from the global north. The pictures we're using are for polar bears and pandas that we have none in Africa. We don't spend time to really contextualize it in terms of what does this really mean to the African people? What does it mean to the people? What does it mean to their livelihood? And all the many things that are affecting them. So that was really, really important when we spoke about it. We talked about what everyone knows about how we've contributed the least to the climate problem that we're in today. Less than 4% of the historic carbon emissions are coming from the continent. And we've also talked about how a big number of us are affected, including over 1 billion people lack access to clean cooking, for instance. And we are having more resonates with the majority of the African people. Now, when it came to that's the appetizer. So when it came to the second appetizer, we had a feel in the room in terms of the different campaigns that people were doing in the continent. First, to understand what's really happening, but also to see ways that we can all support each other. And I'm saying the support and solidarity here because it's important. Most of us only engage when something is, within your responsibility or within what your organization is doing. We don't first think about what's important for the continent and therefore supporting each other with the different campaigns that are happening. So we had from the room a campaign on Don't Gas Africa. Who is hearing about it for the first time? Don't Gas Africa. Have you always heard about it? Don't Gas Africa. So we still have to do some work to make sure people know more about it. But it's a campaign to try and push against fossil gas as a transition fuel for the energy crisis that we have. Most of you have heard World Bank, Africa Development Bank are trying to push for gas as the transition fuel. For the 600 million people I told you don't have access to electricity, they're saying maybe the easiest way to do that is through gas. So it's a campaign that's really been doing a lot of work within the continent to push back against that with a lot of successes that I don't have a lot of time to speak about. Please just Google it and you'll learn more about it. The second campaign we had from is the Fossil Fuels Non-Proliferation Treaty. Prince Papa is right there, if you could stand so that people see you. It's a really amazing campaign that's trying to push against fossil fuels. We're talking about coal, oil, and gas within the whole world. But they're doing a lot of work to make sure that it's also rooted within Africa. So they have a chapter that's speaking more about Africa. They have a strategy on Africa. So please reach out to him if you want to be involved in terms of that discussion. We need more and more of us involved. Since they've been founded, they've caused a lot of problems from the Stop EACOP community, people in Uganda and Tanzania, the Mozambique community in Cabo Delgado, and many, many other parts of the continent. So it's a campaign to try and show that we are not just reacting to the problems, as our good friend was talking about, but actually we want to make an example to one of the biggest problems that we're having in this continent. And the idea here is not to get them to reform, but to actually get them out of the continent and pay the relevant reparations that need to be paid. In that campaign, I'm helping to support it, and also my colleague Dean. So feel free to speak to me if you want to be more involved around it. And then finally, I want to speak about the campaign on the Global Week of Action. I will ask Fred to just stand, and then I'll read this, and then just stop with it. And then consider this your dessert, right? So as we approach COP29, the need for climate finance and a fossil fuel phase out has never been more urgent. The highly developed countries in the global north are primarily responsible for the climate crisis, yet they have consistently failed to meet their climate obligations, leaving the global south to bear the brunt without adequate support. This is a critical moment for us to demand justice. From September 13 to 20, this is really important, between September 13 to September 20, next month, which is beginning the day after tomorrow, we are organizing the Global Week of Action for Climate Finance and a Fossil-Free Future. This week of mobilization is an opportunity for African youth to unite and amplify our demands for climate justice, a just energy transition, and the necessary finance to achieve these goals. So we are specifically
Thank you very much. Now we will hear from the group that discussed economic justice, ownership and control of our African economy. You're welcome, Namata.
Thank you, comrades. I want to first, quick step up, if you don't mind. Okay. Very quick, very quick. All we're going to do is I'm going to say Africa must unite, and the answer will be now. Okay? Africa must unite! Africa must unite! Africa must unite! That was essentially our answer, but please have a seat. Thank you, comrades. So essentially what we are talking about is the fact that in order to achieve true economic freedom, we know that we must have political freedom, political unity, right? It is not possible to have any sort of sustainable freedom until we are able to unite. So that is the first thing that we must establish, and this is where our starting point from which our conversations began. Now, we know that economic liberation follows political liberation. And we also know that once you get into a space like the one that we are in now, where you are facing a neo-colonial system, you then end up dealing in situations where if you are balkanized, if you are set apart, then you are unable to create any sort of system where you are not compromised. So again, we had to, and then we moved on from there. Like increasing tax revenue as opposed to increasing production. So once you start to recognize these sorts of things, then you also start to point at the things which you know will liberate you. Production over revenue, right? Over tax revenue case. When you look at the way in which we are moving at the moment, for example, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, you then start to realize that you cannot, again, without unity, create something sustainable. If you do not have freedom of movement for the people, but their money can move, who is moving their money? Where is the freedom in that? So there was that recognition as well. We are speaking about ownership. Ownership is what creates sustainability. So we started looking at the various nations that were present in the room and the situations that they have been facing. You look at Liberia, which had a massive rubber plantation, which was exporting raw material and then importing finished goods, right? So they're spending the majority of the money that is spent on these products is being expatriated. When you look at South Africa, a nation that people often think is in a better economic situation, you recognize the fact that these are people who once independence was won, they realized that a lot of deals had been made outside of them. So they did not actually have the economic freedom that they were promised in their work, in their struggle towards that freedom. You look at Cote d'Ivoire, where even when they did have structures in place that were towards economic freedom, you had issues of management of structures where there was a lot of corruption and undermining of the structures that were in place. You also look at Uganda, where you have a dictator like Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who is a dictator, in case anyone is not sure. Whose regime has captured all sorts of production across the country. So that is not in service of the people. Now, when you look at that, with the example of Uganda, as our comrades from Uganda pointed out to us, Ugandans have now started to associate Pan-Africanism with Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. So what does that speak to? That speaks to a need to build the African personality. We need to now get into a space where our education is capturing what we aspire to. It is capturing the ideological sector. It is capturing every sort of space, ideological, economic, every sort of education that is possible to bring us into a space where the general public have a clarity as to where we stand and where we are moving. We have seen this successful in countries like Cuba. It is not impossible. It is not impossible. I can stop there. Viva Cuba! So we saw a number of examples. We saw Kenya, where even down to an example like, well, we know what is currently ongoing in Kenya, and we stand in solidarity with our comrades there. But an interesting example, which also spoke to a little sort of side effect of all of these things, where you have Africans who cannot afford to enter into African spaces. And so these spaces are being sort of corralled off for foreign entities. How much time do I have left? Hey, I'm running out of time. Okay. So we went through a number of examples, Somalia, Zambia. We saw the repeated issue, front and back, every back and forth. Everything we saw was the same sort of thing. So one, there's the political education that's necessary. There's an education that gets us into a space where we've built the African personality that is able to claim the spaces that we are making. But there's also the recognition that we can start building in the forms of things like cooperatives. But even with that, there is also the recognition that we have to move a point that was made earlier on was about ideology. Which ideology do we take, right? The fact of the matter is that our oppression has been capitalistic in nature, so we should not be ashamed to state our left position. Now, if we are able to take that position, if we are able to take that stance, then we also need to recognize that it does not mean that you are excluding those who do not align with you. Because in order for there to be synthesis, there must be contradiction. You must be able and for work for the people. And so that once you are creating the opportunities for that, you start building your parallel systems of economy, your parallel systems of means of production. But while you are doing that, you are engaging outside of it. It is through those that you then start to build and expand the footprint that this united Africa looks like. That's how people start to imagine and start to be able to duplicate and build the Africa that we all deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Namat. And next is the breakout session that discussed fighting against all forms of human trafficking, modern-day slavery, and discrimination based on work and descent.
Comrades, where I come from, we use that as a way of awakening the spirit of the mass of our people. I want to say that we had a fantastic panel session. We wouldn't have been able to have that if we did not have in our midst fantastic comrades. And I want to use this Thank you very much, comrades. Comrades, as it has been said, our session was on fighting against all forms of humanity, fighting against all forms of human trafficking, modern day slavery, and discrimination based on work and decent. Well, comrades, firstly, members of this group arrived at a major important conclusion that the question of human trafficking, the question of modern slavery, cannot really be discussed without not, pointing directly at capitalism. That in fact, capitalism is at the heart of the continuous process of modern slavery. In fact, members of this group arrived at a major conclusion that indeed, when capitalism was young, the major concept or the conception around capitalism was that he who does not work or she who does not work must not eat. That if you do not work, you won't eat. That was the earliest motto of capitalism. But that today, things are quite different in the sense that there are millions of people, there are millions of Africans that are ready to work, but there are no jobs. And what capitalism is saying to them is that go and die, go and die. And that is why on this basis, for whatever we discussed, we made it a point of duty of castigating capitalism or saying that capitalism is behind all of these nuances. Members of this group began by identifying the fact that there is indeed an unfinished business of the Atlantic slavery. And if we're going to have to discuss modern day slavery, and in our oppressive identity. It is true that the majority of masses of African people really do not know anything about, our Africanity. And you cannot but discuss this reality without not pointing to, the Atlantic slavery. Indeed, you cannot discuss human trafficking today on the continent without not making that references to the fact that this is nothing but a legacy of the transatlantic slavery. But importantly, members of this group resolved born from the legacies, the manifesting legacies of the Atlantic slavery, sex slavery is an issue on the African continent as at this time. Forced migration is an issue, as at this material point on the continent. And free migration giving birth to brain drain in our African continent. Things are in fact at the heart of what you can classify as quote modern day slavery, sex slave, forced migration, and of course involuntary migration that has given birth to the question or the crisis of brain drain. But we said that mostly in our workplaces, because we must identify how capitalism seems to be affecting, our own existence as at this material point in time. And we pointed out that all of the former sectors that we have today in this society clearly do not belong to us. The former sector is nothing but a construction of the Indo-European system. And that is why we have today a banking sector that really do not this is a reflection of the fact that we do not own our institutions. That is. That's what it is. You put on ties, even when our atmospheric condition do not permit it. It is not. You begin to imagine how can you be against your own atmospheric condition? You should be in tandem with it, whatever you wear. It is what it is, comrades. So the African personality is indeed being subjugated in our workplaces. So for instance, if you cannot wear your African wears to the banks as a worker, they in fact begin to consider you coming up with African theories and practices on how you run a banking system. To begin with, how? Who is going to consider this when the wares that you have on is nothing to do with the African realities and conditions? So, we point out that there is indeed a subjugation of the African personality in our workplaces, and this needs to be condemned. We also established that human trafficking exists because we have a backward border system in Africa. In fact, we came up with that understanding that there is an existence of militarization, monetization, and sexualization of our borders. That this crisis does exist, across the African continent. I promise members of this group will resolve that nobody on this continent should be. Nobody on the African the Ghana president as a refugee. As such, Congress will resolve that nobody on the African continent should be called a refugee, rather we should be called special guest. Special guest. Nothing but special guest. We agree that you cannot discuss the oppression going on, the subjugation going on in the formal sector. We're not pointing out that those that are suffering the most are women. Nothing but women. And we gave several instances of how women have been oppressed in the workplaces. How the labor of women have been reduced to nothing. It's been reduced to nothing. How the body of a woman becomes a point of negotiation, even in the workplaces. Comrades, we point out that this is something that has got to be condemned. The bodies of our women have got to be respected and honored and valued. And we can't get from the private sector. And across the African continent, the private sector should be held responsible to some extent in the continuous process of the oppression and the exploitation of the labor of our women. And finally, we established that for whatever we have to do at this point in time in getting rid of the effects, the nefarious effects of modern day slavery, because comrades, it makes no sense when the best amongst us are leaving this continent in search of quote and unquote the greener pastures. What that really mean, as one of our comrades used to say, we were at the Cape Coast yesterday, comrades. 2024, should there be a slave ship at that Cape Coast right now? The mass of our people will go down there to go to Europe. That is the reality of the African continent. You know why? Because we have leaders across the African continent. We have continue. Forever, it shall always fight for our life. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that elaborate presentation and for reminding us of our primary school debate days. Madam Proposer, Madam Opposers, I'm here to propose this. Very articulate. Thank you so much. The final presentation will come from those who discussed beyond apologies, concrete steps for
reparative justice. Are they here? Yes, please. You're welcome.
Finally, my moment of fame. Ensure the cameras are capturing my eyes well. Where's Hadi? Since he introduced me here publicly as a Kiswahili teacher, I'll start by teaching you a bit of Kiswahili. So I'll say hi in Kiswahili. Hamjambo. Hamjambo. Mimi naitwa Eunice Adhiambo. Je m'appelle Eunice Adhiambo. My name is Eunice Adhiambo. I'm an African who was born and lives in the Kenyan coast region. And I'll be talking to you about what we discussed in this group. We started by looking at whether there have been any efforts for reparative justice, and the answer was yes. This discussion started a long time ago, but we are wondering why up to now we are still demanding, and not even demanding it loud enough. In 2001, there was the famous Durban Conference on racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related crimes. And there was an adoption of a declaration and a plan of action that was supposed to be implemented within a decade. Tell me what happened, I don't know. In 2011, just before the attack on the Twin Towers, there was a conversation on reparations. Of course, the bombing of the Twin Towers distracted, the whole globe focused more on terrorism and forgot that we were talking about reparations. There was a Pan-African trillion or something like that. Why we haven't been paid to date, you tell me. In 2022, there was an Accra summit right here in this very town, and there was a declaration on reparations and healing. 2023, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights adopted a decision on reparations. 2023, again, the AU developed a unified position on reparation and healing. They even recommended that henceforth there will be an annual convening on reparations. Fast forward, 2024, we are planning another campaign on reparations. My question is, till when are we going to plan conversations? When are we going to get down to the demands and payments? But there are conditions that have been hindering us from doing this. And one of the conditions is that slave trade and colonialism is a highly contextualized debate. If you go to East Africa and you're talking, they'll tell you something different. Yesterday we were here and I was trying to ask our guide how the transatlantic slave trade was related to the East African one, but he could not answer. Many of them have been conditioned to talk to tourists. So we need to dig a little bit more. Up here, we make it technical. in that room, we were talking about reparations, but I doubt if my grandmother walked into that room, if she would understand what we were saying. We had a lot of jargon spoken through our noses in English accents that many Africans may not understand. So then what did we suggest that we were going to do? The first thing that we thought we should do is research and documentation. Most of the history we are preaching, we were taught from an English curriculum in Kenya, probably from a French curriculum in the countries you come from. What do we say about slavery and colonization from our own perspective? So we need to dig, we need to document, and we need to create our own version, our own messages on reparations. The second thing that we need to do is to carry out reparative justice education. I'm sure in this room, if we were talking about reparations, probably just a handful of people would be able to engage conclusively with the topic. And when we are offering this reparative justice education, it involves unlearning what we have learned and learning about slavery, learning about colonization and the consequences of colonization from our own perspective, not from the perpetrator's perspective. We talked about Pan-African conversations to continue. We talked about transcontinental movement building. We had a sister from the diaspora in the group, and it saddened me this organization, Reform Initiative, is organizing a 15 to 18-month campaign on reparations, and they're focusing on restoration, reconstruction, repairing, and of course, resisting any further forms of slavery and colonization. So these are areas we need to interact with. My time is up. The same way our time was up when we were discussing this. So we didn't get to really talk about so much, but legal steps were also proposed. Healing is for us, but what are we doing to the perpetrators other than asking them to pay? That is cheap, they're rich, they can pay. So legal steps were proposed. Can we take them to the International Criminal Court, for instance? You know, those are we need to interact with. Finally, December this year, the Berlin Conference, 120 years since the Berlin Conference. So actors are organizing that every nation that came up as a result of the Berlin Conference will send representatives to Berlin. We will converge there and tell them that we survived. And it is time to pay up. Yeah. So at African Rising, we will continue with this conversation. If you have signed up for this campaign, we already have your contacts. If you still want to sign up for this campaign, please sign up. We will establish a
Oh, yes, a photo. Let's have a photo up with my co-moderator. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. You may take your seats. I will now invite my co-moderator to tell us what will be coming next and lead us to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been an interesting session. And again, we give it up for them. I don't know how we put together these amazing reporters. Everyone came with so much energy. To keep energy alive, we want to have an artistic performance. You know that Africans Rising works with a lot of artists across the continent, and that's one of the main focuses of Africans Rising. And amongst us, there are several amazing artists in the room. We're going to have one of them come up to give us an interlude. Wazy is already here. Wazy is an artist and Pan-Africanist from Zambia. And Wazy, we are delighted to have you serenade us this afternoon. He's coming from outside. Okay, so you're accompanying Wazy. Thank you very much. Is it up? My name is Wazy. Sorry about that. This is my new friend. I just met him 30 minutes ago. Can you hear the guitar? Please, a round of applause for him. This song is titled Lead with Love. See a lot of good people doing great things in my society. Building orphanages, killing the youth and taking care of the people. It's not always what government can do for the people, but what people can do for themselves. And that's also society. To end misery, slavery, or poverty. Yes, it's a possibility. We need to give one another. We need to learn to share with each other, not always blaming one another. Become the change you want to see. Yes, we need to give one another. We need to share with each other. Give it so many things before we do it. Is lead with love. To stand and all we do is lead with love. I love him, that don't bring back what you can't change. What's I think we like it, Chicago fire, my love.
Self-love, the best of the
what we discuss with them in such a manner that they understand what our work is about. How many of you? And don't lie. Okay, about just under 1/3. So, if we are not able to communicate what our struggle is about to the people closest to us, what chance do we have to communicate to the people who are not related to us? So, it has been said before, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get different results. Now, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. My life of 45 years of activism, I meet that definition of insanity. Honestly, right? Doing the same thing over and over again in good faith, trying to move things along. So I say to you, my brothers and sisters, that we have come to a point some 2.5 years ago, our son sat his mom down with me and said, I need to tell you all something. And he said, you guys are really bad at your jobs. You're like really crap at what you'll do. So we say, why? And he says, well, you'll be fighting for human rights, democracy, gender equity, sustainability. And when we look what's happening in the world, everything is going in the wrong direction. So why don't you all recognize that you're old, just chill, spend time with your grandchildren and spend the time that you should have spent with us around doing your activism. So when we asked him, why is it, do you think we are failing? He said, it's because you all think you can move people by simply aiming everything you say, your messages, your narratives to the brain. So on climate, for example, we rely on climate science, policy, facts and figures, degrees, parts per million, and so on. And I want to just give you a quick example of my brother. I'll come back to my son. My brother, when I was in prison in Greenland for occupying an oil rig that was starting to drill for oil in the Arctic Ocean, went on national television in South Africa and was trying to say to them, to mobilize the South African government to intervene to get me out of prison. And they asked my brother, who is a world-renowned optometrist, 2 PhDs and all of that. They say, very educated guy. So he says to him, so what exactly was Kumi doing there in the Arctic? And my brother says on national television, to Africans rising moving forward that we need to consider. We have to consider how we can talk in a way that actually reaches our people. So coming back to our son, he then says to us, you'll focus everything on the brain and you'll ignore the heart, the body, and the soul. And then he said, if you look at the most successful politicians and movements today, the horrible ones, whether it's Trump, whether it's Modi in India, whether it's Bolsonaro in Brazil, or Ruto, they just bypass the brain. They bypass the brain and they go straight to the heart. Of course, all of them tell massive lies. And then he said, you don't need to lie like they do, but we don't have to be so boring with the facts. And so, I want to say that we have reached a moment, and that is why I've been so impressed with the presence of culture in this gathering, and the fact that in the awards, African Rising has a special award for Artivistic Activists or Artivist Award. Right now, I would say to you that the biggest allies we need in our struggle are our musicians, our dancers, our theater people, our artists, our movie makers, our documentary makers, our influencers, etc., etc. We have to be able to broaden the message beyond us. Otherwise, we become part of the problem and we become preaching to ourselves. And importantly, we have to recognize we cannot solve the problems, the systemic problems that we face with the same logics, frameworks, and in the last 2.5 years, really focused on bringing the worlds of arts, culture, and activism, what we call promoting artivism, together. And sadly, some of you might know him. His name was Ricky Rick from South Africa. He was a brilliant rapper and hip hop artist. And sadly, he committed suicide 2.5 years ago. And I use that to make this point, which I'm really concerned about how we are supporting each other. My dear brothers and sisters, and those who define yourself as non-binary, it's really important that we recognize that one of the biggest crises that activism faces today is a massive mental health crisis. We cannot do this work and face the amount of repression that we face, the amount of resource challenges that we face, the amount of disrespect that we face without there being consequences. So I want to say to the leadership of Africans Rising today that we have to be thinking about how do we think about mental health as a challenge. And let's be clear, this is not just for activists, it's for our people as much as it's for us. And today, we need to mobilize a level of participation of our people that we have never seen on this planet before. And I just want to stop here because I know some of you I can see are getting depressed, right? So I want to give you some good news, especially my brother with a very nice shirt who did the presentation on climate. So you probably heard him and me and very many people saying things like, save the planet, save the environment, save the climate at some point. I have some good news for you. The planet is just fine. The planet doesn't need saving. Well, think about it. If we continue on our addiction to oil, will be the capability to grow food. It's already happening. Parts of our continent is becoming depopulated. The folks that are jumping on the ships and going across, they are climate refugees as much as anything else. So, if that continues, what will happen? We will be gone because we'll eventually become extinct. The planet will still be here. Now, the good news for all of you who are worried about saving the planet, once we become extinct as a species, the forests will grow back, the oceans will recover, and so on. So understand that the struggle to avert catastrophic climate change is nothing more and nothing less than protecting our children and their children's future. And there can be nothing more important than that. So, in conclusion, to the first question anyway, I think where we are from the moment we started the dream of Africans Rising in 2016 to where we are, we all should feel proud. One, that we are just here. Even if the audience was like 1/4 of what it is, it would still be, we have not disappeared, okay? But secondly, as you can see, I've got a few gray hairs, maybe not that few. When we started it, we had the vision of making sure that this movement will be led by young people. And can I ask you to put your hands together for all the young people that are leading Africans Rising for justice, peace, and dignity? So, having said Far too many of our people are too busy simply trying to survive and put food on the table, to know about climate change in its theory or rights-based approaches or whichever other language that we learned from some person in the global north. Okay? We need to get our own language. We need to be able to speak arts and culture because many of our people can be moved more easily that way. So I want to bring my comments to a conclusion by saying that all the different pillars of Africans Rising is critically important, right? Critically important that we recognize that because our movements have historically been dominated by men, right? Like me, okay? Because our movements have been dominated by men, we have lost something. There was a wisdom given to us decades ago by the feminist movement when they gave us a very powerful term, but I must admit a very complicated word. Anybody knows what I'm talking about? Nobody? Shout it out, somebody. What word am I talking that the feminist movement gave us as a gift and we didn't embrace it fully? Patriarchy, no, there's another word. It's starting with I.
Intersectionality.
Yes, you can see how easy it was to come out, eh? Yes, yes. What's the point of the revolution that if you cannot dance? So let me just say, intersectionality, the women's movement, because fundamentally they are connected. The last point I want to make is about humility, right? I stand before you as a person who feels that what our son told us was correct, that we got things wrong. And we now must be humble to also recognize we might not know every answer to every question. And just me ask you to think about this. How do we get other people involved? If we stand on the stage like I did when I was head of Greenpeace and Amnesty and so on, my colleagues would give me briefing notes and I had to stand and give a press conference and so on and acted like I knew everything. Right? If the media asked you, what's your position on this, you had to sort of say, our position is like that. But why is it wrong for us to be able to say, actually, we know the broad direction we need to go is reduce emissions, increase equality, to help us shape the detail. And you might have heard of a new movement of thinking called the culture of emergence, which means that we might not know everything, but by creating space for people to come and work with us and co-create with us, we can have those solutions emerge. And therefore, I want to say something that sufficiently, those of us who see ourselves as progressive sort of FT activists, for example, in
Unbelief, 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 Africa, unbelief, 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 Africa. Okay, one more time. You believe, unbelief, 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 Africa. One more time. Unbelief, unbelief, Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have a last comment on this amazing. Thank you, keynote. When you talked about the needs for us to tap into the heart and not just the intellect, it made me think about an anecdote with Thomas Sankara. But before that, I think one of the issues sometimes when you're always in the mind, in the position of resistance and fighting in the struggle mindset, you're always reacting, is that you know what you're fighting against. And often the fight is difficult, is painful. But if you're not moved by the you know, when Martin Luther King talk about, I've seen the mountaintop. Essentially what he's talking about, I see the ideal vision. And the thing that allowed him to be able to keep moving forward and to face the challenges, the obstacle, is because what he had as a final vision was the ideal in many ways really contribute to our own oppression. But the way the system works, it's not going to tell you that if you're going to do this, this is going to be the outcome. It's presented as something positive, something seducing. You know, when you think about the American way of life, and you know the full story about what it is behind, you know, these hyper-consumptions, colonialism, control, etc. The outcome of it is exploitation, control, deprivation, and poverty, right? What we need to do is to have an American way of life, an African way of life. So what is the desire for us? What is the vision that we are striving towards? But it's not just a vision of struggle. It has to be a vision rooted in joy, in happiness, in community, in fulfillment. And a quote about Thomas's situation with Thomas Sankara. So this is one of the things that I learned when I was doing the work on Sankara. One day, the wife of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Thomas Sankara, he was assassinated by his best friend, the Minister of Justice at the time, Blaise Compaoré, which eventually became president. And Blaise Compaoré had a wife, Chantal Compaoré, that was instrumental in the coup because she was working for the Western forces. For context, in Francophone Africa, every politics things is organized through secret societies. So she was part of this movement. And one time there was a dinner in the house. They invited Thomas and his wife, the minister of the army and his wife, and Blaise and his wife were there, Chantal. During the dinner, Chantal proposed a bottle of champagne to the guests. And for context, at that time, Burkina Faso was fighting for food sovereignty. And product. And on top of that, it's a luxury product. So I mean, it's a product that is not necessarily, it's very much based on storytelling and branding, right? That's why people appeal for this kind of product. So they proposed the champagne to all of the guests. Thomas politely declined. And on top of that, you have to know that Thomas Sankara, I think she was talking about the life of Kumar, his daughter. I didn't know that he didn't have any possession. Sankara was the same. His salary at that time was $350 a month as a president of a nation. So he politely declined because he had a very frugal life with no luxury and so forth. And obviously that was against his policy, the revolutionary movement in which they were engaged. So he politely declined. And because he did, all of the guests declined. And when the bottle came back to Chantal, a response was, whoever wants to deprive himself from champagne is free to do so. But as far as I'm concerned, I was born and raised with champagne, and I will not deprive myself for a so-called revolution. And that statement was so outrageous that it remained into the final story about what happened in terms of the context and the dynamic in Burkina Faso. And to me, what I understand from it is that here she was a representative of this class of African that been colonized in the mind, consumed, that they were not aware of the real war that was at play. All she saw was luxury, affluence, Western lifestyle, and she understood success from that perspective. And the idea of independence and sovereignty in her mindset was just struggle, hardship, and suffering, right? And ultimately, the people that took power, but eventually they were removed from power, thank God, were moved and corrupted by this mindset. So what we need to do is to fill ourselves with empowered stories. Thing that exists in our world stem from my imagination. We have to understand as well that some of the concepts that we see as reality are imagined in the first place. So we need to question our own assumptions about our reality. And a lot of the assumptions that we have were designed in the first place to keep us in a position of submission and exploitation. So we need to, when people speak about decolonization, we need to make sure that we decolonize our mind as well in the way that we consider reality. That is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christophe. Now, I'd like to invite our final speakers, the panelist and moderator, who will engage us for 15 minutes. Harrison Owusu, are you here? Harrison Owusu. You're welcome. And Kathy Amenya. Kathy Amenya, yes. Okay, this conversation is about money. And if you have a copy of the program, you will see it's called Funding Systems. In Kumi's presentation, he implored us to think about what it is we should continue doing, what we should stop doing, and what we should start doing. I think that funding systems change ourselves is something that we need to look at. Drawn to a close. However, you will have an hour of rest, and everyone will should go to dinner at 19, and at 20 hours at the basketball court, which is in this direction. In this direction, the basketball court is in this direction. We will have the Pan-African Solidarity Vigil. We'll have fireside conversations and the lighting of candles in the memory of our departed comrades across the continent. For now, let me welcome
Harrison to lead us in that conversation about money with Kathy Amenya. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, Andrew. Good afternoon, comrades, ladies and gentlemen. We are so excited to discuss money. And the reason this is very important is because it took money to do all these beautiful things you are seeing here. So this is a very important conversation. I would like you to indulge us just for 15 minutes to delve into these issues and look at how we can fund the Africa we want and how we can make Africans rising sustainable. So our topic today really is looking at funding systems change. How do we fund the Africa we want? And how do we ensure that it becomes sustainable? How do we ensure that Africa's future is secured? And as you know, when you go to we also have other forms of giving, which is your time, giving your energy. I see the youth energy in the room, the chantings and all that. That's also a form of giving. When you and I are growing up, I believe at some point you stayed with an uncle where you supported them, and in exchange, they paid your fees. That is a way of giving. The African way of giving is quite different. Now, on that note, we've tried different models, or we've started to pilot different models, like individual giving called One Afro for a Million. And I want to explain this concept. One Afro meaning that we want every member of Africans Rising to donate one equivalent of $1 to support the movement so that we get to 1 million. So if you have 1 million members, the idea is that each of us would donate one Afro, one Ghana CD, one Dalasi, one Zimbabwean dollar, any local currency that you can give so that we get to 1 million. This is something we've piloted so that we'll be able to sustain our programs and initiatives. Now, we've also tried, and quite recently, we are trying birthday giving. Our hope is that on your birthdays, you'll be able to support Africans Rising or give back to Africans Rising. And I know the experience has always been during December, some of you go to orphanages to donate to orphans. Now, we also want on your birthday, we will not be upset. Now, also, we've tried remittances giving, which is a way we want to get Africans in diaspora to give back. So when you are paying or giving money back to your families in Africa, you want to ensure that at least you take about 2% of that money or 1% and give it to Africans Rising. But that's when if you go to the Western Union to send money. So we are trying to look at different models, you know, to see how best we can sustain Africans Rising. Now, I have here with me Catherine Amenya for Movement for Commitment, who is going to share her experience on how they've. So from there, I'm going to be engaging you in terms of ideas. Really, we've run out of ideas. And as somebody said, in organizational development, the best way to find a solution is go to the people closest to the action. So we are coming to you to find the solutions on how we can fund the Africa we want. So on this note, I'm going to invite Catherine Amenya with a hand of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have Catherine.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Please forgive me for coming here with my laptop. Kizungu sio lugha yangu. English is not my language, and therefore I have to put my thoughts in this colonized kind of document. And so my name, as he said, is Kathy Amenya, and I work for Movement resonate with, but please do not shoot the messenger. So as the Movement for Community-Led Development, MCLD, we're undergoing a significant transition from a grassroots movement, which we started in 2015, to a structured movement organization. And this evolution has been driven by the recognition that to effect lasting change, we must build robust infrastructure to support our initiatives. However, this transition brings to the forefront a critical challenge, the need for sustainable funding. As we embarked on this journey, we are acutely aware of the complexities surrounding funding in the context of African activism. We are not simply seeking financial support, but we are advocating for what we term nutritious funding. And this means that resources that nourish our communities, respect our autonomy, and align with our values and objectives as Africans and communities. And therefore, to do this, the first thing that we have tried very hard to work on is reframing funding relationships. We look at funds as reparations and not donations. It is not a favor that we are being done for, it is our right. We are therefore actively framing is crucial because it acknowledges the historical context of resource extracted African communities, positions the receipt of funds as a matter of justice and rights rather than benevolence of communities to approach funding conversation from a position of strength and choice is a small but significant step in reshaping power dynamics in funding relationships. We therefore work actively in decolonization of aid, and this concept is very central to our approach. And in this approach, we advocate for funding models that prioritize African voices, needs, and decision-making processes. For example, this includes unrestricted funding, participatory grant-making, and direct funding to communities. We have been challenging traditional power structures that often place conditions on aid that may not align with local priorities. We therefore propose mechanisms where funders report to communities on how well they've supported local communities, rather than only requiring grantees to report to funders. We're also pushing for transparency and accountability in both directions, and not just from recipients to funders, but also from funders to recipients. The critical question we continually grapple with is, how do we persistently organizations such as African Rising and movements to amplify our collective voice. We are also developing alternative funding models that exemplify the principles that we advocate for. Now, how does this look like? This means that we have to capitalize on community resources. This is such as social capital and indigenous knowledge. African communities possess a wealth of resources that often go unrecognized in traditional funding models. And as an organization, one of the things that we aim to do is to map out and capitalize on these assets, some of which include social nature. This is the inherent communal spirit and collective problem-solving approaches prevalent in many African societies. We also look at ideas and behaviors. This is innovative solutions and practices that have evolved to address local challenges. We also look at the rich tapestry of cultural identities that inform unique perspectives and approaches. And finally, social capital, which is the network of relationships that can be mobilized for community development like we have in this space. So our strategies for resource mobilization include conducting comprehensive community asset mapping, just as I've said. Now, one of the things that Harrison mentioned is harnessing remittances, which I'm not going to focus on since he's already highlighted that it is something that you But the one thing they never took from us is the ideas that we have and the ability to think creatively as Africans. And therefore, one of the examples that I will give is the free rice game. How many of you know about it? Does anyone know about the free rice game? It's a game developed by the World Food Program, and you can go there, and it's a game it's a knowledge game. So for every right question that you get, they donate 10 grains of rice. Now, like Kuni said, we need to focus on the heart and not necessarily the brain. As human beings, we are built for competition. If I know something and it's going somewhere, then I feel like I'm contributing towards it. No? Why are we as Africans not creating games and other things that can raise funds for us? Because this game purely raises rice bags for every person who plays. And how many times or how many hours do you spend playing games? How many hours do you spend on coins on games? When I thought of this, I was looking at, I watch a lot of those influencers from Ghana, and they're always talking about 1xBet. So I thought if I came to Ghana, I would see a lot of posters on 1xBet. And the only thing I saw was soccer balls, which means betting seems to be a very important aspect is going and how it is changing communities. Maybe this might make a difference. And so I am going to stop there and say thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kathy, for this overview on alternative ways we can fund the movement. And just to come back to you, as I promised, we'd like to engage you and find out what are some of the alternative ways of funding beyond the current traditional funding. And we'd like to have anybody who is moved can raise their hand. Can we have mic runners?
Shall I stand?
Do I need to stand? Okay, thank you. I'm sure, anyway, it's Christian once again.
We'll have just 2 contributions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for the presentation, because that's one of the things that was running through my mind from the very first day that I heard about Africans Rising. Thanks to my sister from Cameroon, Ansel. She seems to be very busy right now. But from the very first day I heard about Africans Rising, I knew that from the initiative, it needs a lot of funding. So I want to thank you for the ideas you've come up with so far. And I just wanted to ask, apart from the usual contributions that you receive, are there other methods that you've tried to think, to get funding? I'm thinking about something like the stock market. By the way, that brings me to an economic commission for Africans Rising. An economic that committee to come up with strategies of how to, make us invest the little that we have. We have 2 years, and within those 2 years, we can see the little that we have in our hand. Where do we put it and make it multiply?
All right.
How do we invest it and, make it multiply so that with or without the one Afro that we're thinking of, we can be sure of organizing this activity and making African Rising sustainable, because Africa needs Africans Rising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Please, what's their name again?
Christian. Christian.
Thank you, Christian. The stock market is one of the alternative ways. Can we have our second person? Okay, we have a male. No female hand. Okay, let's have you. Oh, great. Let's have you, please. 1 male, 1 female. Gender justice.
Thank you so much. The microphone was doing injustice to me. Once again, my name is Lakani Sima, and talking of games as a way of raising funds, something came to my mind, and looking at the marathons that we usually participate in. I'm a fan of marathons, and I usually participate. We pay a lot of money to buy the kits that we use in those sports. So imagine if Africa's Rising had a marathon and each nation was participating, and maybe each member contributing like $10 for a kit. That will be amazing. I'll very look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so the offering is brought to the house. And so one of the ways or recent, discussions we have is how do we, tap into that pot of money, the offering. And faith-based has a lot of money. The Presbyterian Church, the Catholic Church, all these are ways that we can raise money. But I've run out of ideas as to how to tap into that pot of money. So it's our role to decode or decipher how we can get that pot of money. And I'll leave that to you. If you have any ideas, please continue to engage us. So we pilot some of these ideas and see what will come out of it. And again, lastly, we have the individual giving enrollment form that will make available on the platform, the WhatsApp platform. And if you feel like we want to encourage you, not that if you feel like, we want to encourage you to sign up for it and also support Africans Rising for us to continue to have these quality discussions to fund the Africa that we want. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Yes, Sister, for that. It's a very important session coming a bit late, and you can see people are tired. But still, we're happy to see most of you still here and actively participating and sharing your brilliant ideas. I was thinking, can we organize a concert where we open it up to the public and people buy tickets to come? It would serve as a fundraising opportunity, but then also actually also help us to exhibit the talents that we have in Africa and also as a mobilization tool. And so I think this is something that could be very interesting and worth considering. Comrades, it's been a long day, but a very interesting one. I'm sure you're fueled up and energized to continue this struggle beyond here. I'm hoping that we are not only contributing these brilliant ideas to shaping the work of Africans Rising, but we are also looking internally at what we will do in our specific countries, within our communities, beyond the walls of Africans Rising. And so we would like to thank you very much for staying with us and for being such a great audience. And thus the program says we will take an hour rest now. Those who are not here in this hotel, the buses are available. You can hop on them. They'll take you back to your guest houses. You can have a shower. You can take a few minutes to rest. But then come back here at 7 p.m. The buses will be there to bring you back here at 7 p.m. for dinner. After dinner, as we announced, we'll be having the Pan-African Vigil. This is going to be a beautiful ceremony by the pool. You said the basketball court. And we really hope to see as many of you. Those who will not be able to join us, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow